Welcome back to another episode of Rehab Rebels. For this particular episode, I'm going to introduce the universals in the particular of this episode with Lauren. Big takeaway, the universal in her story is that sometimes our chosen career path may not align with our true passion and values. In this case, Lauren discovered her love for art and creativity, which she initially overlooked due to societal expectations and other family influences. Her journey teaches us the importance of recognizing our authentic interests, even if it means stepping away from traditional paths and finding fulfillment in unconventional career choices that resonate with our true selves. So let's dive in a little bit with the bio of Lauren and a little background, and then we'll invite her on the show. Lauren's from St. Louis, Missouri. She attended MGH IHP in Boston for her DPT, and she is currently a handmade dice maker. And a little brief work history, she worked with preschoolers with special needs. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Yeah. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I gotta ask, what are those letters with the school?
So it stands for MGH, Institute of Health Professions, and MGH being Mass Gen Hospital.
Oh, whoa.
So the hospital founded their own grad school that just does PT, OT, speech. I feel like they have a master's in public health now too, but I think its official name is just MGH, Institute of Health Professions.
Oh, whoa. Dang. Okay. Yeah, that's quite a prestigious place. Very cool.
Yeah. We do anatomy at Harvard and stuff. It was so much fun. I loved it.
Awesome. The brief work history with preschoolers working with special needs. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was that shortly after graduating PT school or?
The fun thing is I thought about working with kids when I was applying for PT schools. And then I went to school in Boston where there's 6 PT schools and not as many people as you would think in general. So if you wanted to work with peds, if you got an internship in school, you could. And if you didn't, you were never going to work in peds. So I graduated and went right to outpatient ortho because, that's what you do. And was happily working in outpatient ortho. And then we moved from Boston to New York City, worked again in outpatient ortho, and was just at a soul crushing job. Really didn't like it. Didn't like my boss, didn't like my hours. And my sister-in-law was, didn't you want to work with kids? And I was like, oh, I did. I did want to work with kids. So I just applied to every job that I could in New York City that was a PT job with kids. And I found one that was at a school that was specifically for kids with special needs. And my wonderful boss I have no experience. I just have general PT. She's, if you will accept our terrible pay, I will train you. And I was, yes, 100% I will. And I was the last PT they were able to hire because it paid so bad. So that's when I started working with kids, and she trained me and there were 2 other PTs there, and everyone was super welcoming and wonderful as I was, what are we doing? It was an absolute joy and delight. I mean, when your day gets to go to the playground and teach your kids how to climb on a climbing gym and then blow bubbles, those days were heaven. And then, of course, admin changes and everything goes downhill.
We'll come back to that. Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's go back to what made you decide to become a rehab professional, a PT in the first place.
Yeah, I come from a family of doctors. Both my parents are physicians. My stepdad's a physician. My stepmom is a med device rep. So as far as I knew, that was the only thing to get into when you got to be older. So I was, I'm going to be a doctor, right? Then you get to college and you're like, whoo, pre-med is something. But I'm going to be a doctor because I just didn't even know what else was out there. There was either doctor or nurse. That's all I knew that existed. And then I took a physiology class. I went to Washington University in St. Louis for undergrad. I took a human physiology class, and it was by a woman who was a PT and had a PhD in physiology. And I was, she's amazing. I should do that. But I focused on the PhD in physiology part. I'm going to get my PhD. What am I going to do with this PhD? I don't know. And then I just sat like an idiot and walked like an idiot because, I was in college and my posture was terrible. And I was mentioning to her that I had a ton of back pain, and she just looked at me and she was, we need to work on your posture. You need to go to see a PT. And I was, oh, that other thing that you do in addition to being the most amazing teacher at this school. And I walked in and the PT she was so wonderful and knowledgeable. And she just took her hands and just corrected me, put me back up to where I was supposed to be. I had such terrible sway back. And I had my shoulders down because I had been pulling them down because I was so worried about lifting them up because I studied and had so much tension in my body. I surely should pull these down more. So I'd over pulled my shoulders down and I was like, oh, I don't hurt anymore. This is amazing. This is magic. 80% of my pain was gone in the first day. And I want to do this. This is what I want to do. At that point, I was still, I'm going to be a PT. And then there was a month where I'm going to be a zookeeper. Just 6 months where my whole life trajectory was just all over the place. And then I did follow the PT thread and went in that direction.
And what was the story behind the first sense of awareness that things weren't quite right as a physical therapist, working as a physical therapist?
Well, first it was when I was working with adults and this isn't quite filling me the way I want it to.
Tell us more about that. Why isn't it filling you up? Why isn't it filling your cup up?
I don't know. And isn't that so scary after you've just spent so much money to be like, oh, no, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. And I was working in outpatient and I had at least 2, if not 3 patients at a time. Sometimes I had 4, which was only when someone we thought was going to cancel actually showed up. But I was getting a little overworked and a little bored. It's definitely also when you're like brand new and you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good at this. Maybe I should just stop. So I stuck with that company until we moved. And then I moved to a whole different vibe. With Boston, I had been working in the basement of a rec center. Most of my patients were on Medicaid. I actually really, really enjoyed working with that population and really helping out because I know it's also very hard for people who are on Medicaid to find good PT. So it was really fulfilling there. And then I went to New York City and worked in a, 1 hour, one-on-one Pilates based outpatient where like most of my patients were stock traders, stock brokers. There we go. I worked at the Fed and stuff. And I was like, oh, there's some whiplash here. But my boss was terrible. So I again felt entirely unfulfilled. And that's when I was like, oh, I should work with kids. And then that was so much fun until it wasn't.
The place that you said that the boss was terrible, but you were working with, it seems like decent population of adults. I think some of them were stock traders and stuff. What was it about that environment that I'm assuming made you shift into going to work with peds?
It was mainly my boss. And the hours were so terrible because, New York, everyone works late. My rush started at 6. So I'd be at work until 8 and then I would have to write all my notes.
At night?
Yeah. I would not get home till 9 sometimes. I mean, at this point, no kids, young in New York. I was, oh, this works. But it didn't. And then she wouldn't pay me. She also made me 1099 when I should have been a W-2. And the kicker is that I interviewed with a PT and she was great. And then she was, oh, well, my other co-owner of these 2 clinics is going to be working with you there. And I'm like, that's great. She's going to be fine. She was not. She was an acupuncturist and she kept telling me what to do and being, do you know how to read an MRI? And then they hired a chiro, pushing me to make all my patients go to him. And I did not like him. And the other acus didn't like him. And it was just, I'm done. I'm not dealing with you anymore. I think I was there for 6 months. I was basically the head PT at this clinic because there was no other PTs there. I was the first one. I really loved being in charge of everything. If something breaks, I'm going to go be the one to fix it. Our windows didn't open, which makes sense in a New York high rise, but also it was so hot with the heat was on. So I figured out how to disable the window locks so that we could open them and not roast. But she was just so mean and disheartening that I don't need this. I'm going to go chase children and get paid so much less.
Okay. Yes. And you love this environment and everything. And you were talking about some administration changes. And so tell us how come it didn't work out long term? What's the story there?
When I joined working with kids with special needs, which I am fully aware that I'm not sure if that's the correct term anymore. We didn't really have that conversation at school because I left in 2020. So I'm sorry if I'm not quite using the right term. All of my children had IEPs. That's just the blanket term that I would use. But when working with my kiddos, as I would call them, there were a lot of behavioral issues with some of the children, and figuring out how to actually work with these kids took training. You couldn't walk in off the street and be like, oh, I'm just going to babysit a kid. Working with them in productive manners in ways that weren't mean, you had to be trained on. And when I started, we had amazing support. We had a school psychologist. We had a school ABA who used it in a very productive and loving way, not the way that I know a lot of people really hate ABA for just drilling things into kids' heads. We didn't use it like that. We had really good support, and we felt what we said as therapists mattered to the admin about we need more time for this. You can't make us write 8 progress reports in 1 month. And just slowly we got bought out by a new company, and I received one raise in the 5 years that I worked there, and it was for $1 an hour. And they went from covering our insurance to not covering our insurance and taking away overtime when they ask us to write 6 progress reports for our kids, which also involves writing a new IEP for them in 1 month while also doing all your other requirements. And it just wore us all down. And then they moved us to a new school and decreased our gym space by literally 300%. I did the math because I was so mad. And I was, no, I'm not coming back here. They gave us a space for the gym and a space for our offices. And we ended up separating out half of the office space so that the OTs would actually have a place to work with our kids because we didn't have any space. And at that point, I was very pregnant. I think we moved when I was 5 or 6 months pregnant with my daughter. And I knew I was not coming back. So I just decided to be a pain in the butt. Like, had a staff meeting and they're like, things are going to get better. And I was, when? How? Because you're doing X, Y, Z, which everyone wanted to say, but everyone's, okay, I don't want to get fired. And I'm just so incredibly pregnant. I'm like, they're not going to do anything to me. So I'm going to say what everyone here wants to say.
No, I totally get it. I had some similar experiences in my first PT job where it was just so many different things were just falling apart, and it was just nobody would listen. Nothing was actually changing. It was either they tell you what you think you want to hear just to keep you quiet, or it's this is what corporate says, we can't do anything about it. And it's I can't do this anymore. So I totally relate. And being a pregnant woman, I hear that this is the third time I think I've heard that, where there's been situations where you guys were pregnant and for whatever reason, the situation either wasn't getting better or got worse. And you guys already made the decision, nope, not coming back to this after I give birth and all that. So there's something about that is a pivotal point for y'all.
Yeah, it's a very easy exit point. That's for sure. I had a whole other school that I was planning on shifting to that one of my friends, one of the PTs actually had left and moved to another school. And she was like, yeah, no, it's pretty good. Great. After I have my kid, I'm going to take 6 months off. I'm going to go work at that school. It's going to be great. And then COVID hit in New York City and everything pivoted.
For sure. So what made you decide to go down this new career path of creating dice professionally? Yeah.
So I had been making dice as a hobby starting in 2019, April 2019. And I had really liked it. I found it fulfilling. I had gained myself a little following on Instagram. I was selling my dice on Etsy, and already work in mid to late 2019 is just when we saw that things weren't going great at work. And I remember sitting in my office and being like, okay, how many dice do I have to make per week to be equivalent to what I make at this job? Okay, how long does it take me to make dice? Could I do that? And there was a part of me that I could do that. I think I can do that. But it was still just a hobby. The funny thing is I was charging like $40 a set for at that point. I charge much more now. And I like how little Lauren was, I could totally do this, charging $30-$40 a set. Like, no, you really couldn't have, girl. But I like your gusto for thinking that you work that quickly. Yeah, so I had already started thinking about it, and my husband was being very supportive. He was like, whatever you think you want to do, I believe in you to make it work. So once everything shut down in New York City and it became very clear that the school that I wanted to switch to working to was all remote. And I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people here that had to do PT over remote who are listening and realize that that's not great. Working with my kiddos over Zoom in their homes, also not great. Trying to get the parent to facilitate. So I had, I think, 21 kids on my schedule, and I emailed all the parents, here's what we're going to do. It did take my school 4 weeks to figure out how to do online courses because they were just so disorganized. And I think I saw 4 kids. Half my parents were Spanish speaking. So we had to figure out an interpreter so that none of them even reached back out. One of my Spanish speaking parents did, which is great because it was one of my kiddos who really needed PT. She was walking for the first time independently. And it was so exciting for all of us because she was 4 and had been mainly in walkers and wheelchairs. And we got her walking. But I got one session with her because we had to have a sibling translate. It was not great. So it became very clear that that was not a fulfilling way to do PT either. Once my daughter was born and I finished maternity leave, I'm out. And we realized also that we didn't want to live in New York City in an apartment anymore with a baby. So we moved to St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm from. And they don't have preschools that are just all for kiddos with special needs. That's one thing that really made that job so special, is that everyone within one spot. We had the OTs across the hall. We had the speech therapist just down the hall. We had our school psychologist, everyone in-house, and we all worked together so well as a team. And that doesn't really happen outside of New York. So I realized I didn't want to drive from school to school doing PT with kids in hallways. So I was like, you know what? Let's do DICE. Let's follow this little dream. Let's see if it works. And that was mid 2021. And now here we are.
What were some of the first signs of traction and really the story and emotions behind it with this dice making career journey?
I think my first one was when I had my first viral tweet that got 9 or 10,000 likes, which was huge in the dice community back then. I know, it was very exciting. I was very newly pregnant with my daughter and I got a ton of orders and people like this. People are willing to pay for this. Even then it was $60, I think, for that set. My poor buyers had to wait 12 weeks, if not longer, for those dice. And everyone was super happy to just wait. As I was sorry, I had to order handmade flowers from a woman who lives in Ukraine. And so that took a while. But yeah, everyone was super nice about waiting and excited about the next thing that I was going to make. And my custom commission slots were filling up. And I was, I think I can do this. But I'm also, working a full-time job. So I get home at 4:30 and then would immediately start making dice until 11 p.m.
So were you working as a PT full-time and then doing this when you got home on the side thing?
Yeah. So I did that up until my daughter was born because resin fumes are really toxic. I made myself a little casting tent out of a grow tent so I could vent the fumes directly out of my apartment and stuff. But you have to shower after every time you cast and babies don't like to wait. So there was no chance of me getting to do resin work because if she woke up from a nap early and I was fully suited up and had resin on my hand, that wasn't going to work. So I took I think it was a 15-month break from making dice after my daughter was born because we had to move and get her into daycare and all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense for sure. And then after she was in daycare, is that when you resumed back to the dice making?
Yep, pretty much. She went into daycare and I got into full, let's get this going. At first, she was only there 3 days a week and I don't have enough time to make dice. I need to get her in full time so I can really dive into this. That was mid 2021. And ever since then, I've just been, continuing to work to try and make myself more efficient so I can just make as many dice as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're like a business owner. What would you say is a struggle, a big personal struggle that you went through with this transition from being a PT, leaving the field into going all in on your professional dice making that you're willing to share? And how did you overcome that challenge?
I think the biggest challenge for me was definitely the side eye that I was getting from my family. Yes, thank you for supporting me as I became a PT. My parents are also physicians. So I definitely got it you're going into PT? And then I was, yes. And it's great. And you will respect me. It was great when my dad finally had to go to PT for himself. And he was, and I was, yes, you get it now. And then to leave that and be like, I do art now.
I make dice for a living.
Yeah, I don't even do traditional fine art. I'm not doing oil paintings in the garden. I make dice. I open with, I'm Lauren. I make dice for games like Dungeons and Dragons.
Lauren, can we dive into that? I'm really curious about where did you see maybe the acceptance and realization and or maybe respect from your colleagues, from your family about your decision to actually do this full-time professionally and create a business? Where was that moment that they were like, oh, okay, I see you now. I respect you. I see what you're doing.
Yeah. So the fun thing is my colleagues were, go for it. Do it. This is amazing. I texted some of my PT friends because I needed some particular sprinkles that I couldn't buy in the Midwest. And I had to have them buy them for me in New York City. And it was my old boss. And she was like, so you're doing dice full time now? And I was like, yeah. She's like, that's so great.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
They were always so supportive because doing cool, fun things. And I also had my kids and needed a more flexible schedule than being an outpatient. And when I had been an outpatient, you had to work until 7 p.m. some days. And that was perfectly fine when I had no kids. And now, they're going to make me work till 7. My kids go down at 7. And inpatient isn't for me. All my friends who were moms were like, oh, yeah, no. And then, my family who were, my parents and my sisters who do not have children. My one sister who is now a resident in pediatric neurology and my other sister who is a missile defense engineer.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. And I was just a lowly PT. I was like, I'd be like, well, one of us went to Harvard and it was at least me. I at least have that going.
There you go.
There was definitely a little bit of side eye there, but I also just was feeling so happy and fulfilled and just knew that this was working so well for my family and for me that, I mean, also therapy for years. It's like, I don't really care what my dad thinks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Here's the thing. He also has never overtly said anything about, oh, I can't believe you've done that. But you can just tell a vibe sometimes. And it's so funny. We were meeting new people in like a big dinner setting a few weeks ago. And a guy that my dad had been talking to before came and like sat down with me and my sisters. I'm like, oh, I want to hear about everything that you do. Your dad was telling me so much about you. And I was, wait, me first. What did my dad actually say I do? And he goes, I don't think he actually told me what you do. And I was like, aha.
Caught him.
I was like, I make dice. And he's like, that's so cool. Tell me about it. That's the thing. Most people are like, that's so cool. Tell me more about it. And honestly, if someone doesn't, we're just not going to be friends. We were never meant to be friends. You aren't going to like my energy that I'm going to bring to this if you think that you're like way better than me for that. But I mean, overall, like, the more I do it, my dad started following my Instagram and seeing I'm actually really good at this. I make very cool things. He was very impressed with the Star Wars set that I make, where I have like there's a starry background and then 7 different Star Wars ships floating in some clear resin. So when you roll it, it looks like the ships are around in space. And I also made a set of dice using the sawdust from some walnut that he had for like 25 years that we got milled a long time ago. And he was using it to make a mantle. And I was like, oh, this sawdust looks cool. And I filled a cup with it and I put it in dice. And he was, oh, yeah, I do really cool work, Dad. It's been a lot of me just being very confident in myself and realizing that this just brings me so much joy that I actually just don't care what pretty much anyone thinks at this point.
For sure. What would you say you love most about your new reality as a dice maker?
I love getting to create things with my hands. I always thought that, I was going to find the most fulfillment with helping people. I'm just helping my people in a different way now. I'm helping them get the exact set of dice that they've always wanted to find, but couldn't find. I love the creative aspect of they come to me with an idea and then I turn it into a design and then I make it into dice and then I send them the pictures or the video of it and they're always, it's amazing. But yeah, it's just, I love creating things with my hands. I love thinking up something and then seeing it to come to fruition and getting to do just different things all the time.
What did you learn as a PT in the rehab career that you apply to your new career as a dice maker?
I've been thinking about this because there's not a ton of overlap between the two. There's a lot of asking people questions to clarify exactly what their pain. Okay, is it like this? Is it sharp? Is it stabbing? Is it here? Is it when you do this? Is it when you do that? Does it get better when you do this? And for me, there's a lot of, okay, what do you want? Do you mean this? Do you mean that? When you say a color, do you want it to look like this? Do you want it to look like that? Do you want this? It's a lot of putting things together into a whole. But I think most importantly is for me as a content creator, because I am a dice maker, but a lot of what I do is content creation. I have to make videos that people want to watch to then want to buy my stuff, which means that I have to do voiceover all the time. And I have to think of something to say for 2 videos every day on TikTok. Well, 4 days a week on TikTok. And then I use those videos for every day on everything else. And I think that PT thing that you get where you just have to learn how to talk to people, do small talk and sound cheery no matter what's going on, that kind of element, I think I actually use a lot.
Yeah, those interpersonal skills, for sure, yeah. What would you say is obvious to you now that you struggled to see in the moment? They always say, hindsight's 20/20, but what's obvious to you now that you struggle to see getting to where you are when you are working as a physical therapist?
That I'm just an art kid. I think I've always been meant to do art. When I was working until 9 p.m. at night and I couldn't even come home and cook, which I now realize is creating something with my hands and having a tangible product. That's what put me down of really hating that job is I couldn't create anything. I had no time. And once I got a different job and I was able to start cooking again, and I was able to start doing my hobbies again, like crochet. Downstairs, I have 3 crochet projects and a needlepoint project going on right now. I am always making something with my hands. And I think I should have just admitted that to myself a long time ago. My senior year of high school, I could have had more free periods, but instead I took 10 periods of art. I took ceramics and black and white photography. And my friends were like, you could come hang out with us. I was like, no, I need to go throw some ceramics right now. This is what I want to be doing. So yeah, but when you grow up it's not a high pressure situation. I did go to a private school for high school. So then of course you go off to college and then you find your career and then you go to grad school for that career. And then your parents are doctors, so you're supposed to be something too. It's just you follow the path that seems like the right one because you don't become a professional artist. That's not a thing. Dice making is art, I've come to realize, because for a while I was, oh no, I'm just making dice. I'm making art. They're just functional art and tiny resin art.
It seems like several people in your class, at least a handful of them, are doing these alternative things. And Keith's one of them. He's on episode 30.
Oh, cool. I don't know exactly what he's doing this day, so I'm going to have to go listen to that because
He's doing MBA stuff.
yeah, my husband was going to got his MBA at the same time that I was getting my PT degree. And just a few years after he graduated, he was, can I talk to Chris about MBA stuff? And in my head, I was like, Keith, we just spent all this money on PT school. What are you doing? I get it now, Keith.
Was Andrea in your class too?
Yeah, Andrea was one of my closest friends. We hung out all the time.
Okay. And she's in episode 30. So yeah, I thought that was wow. There's like a group of you guys that were just definitely not going the traditional route and doing your own thing. So I thought that was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I love how Andrea came into it with just realizing that she loved knitting and then being like, oh, I can do some ergonomics tips and then just running with that. And I refer people, crafters, to her stuff all the time because they're, oh, my hands hurt when I'm crocheting or when I'm sanding dice. And I was like, dude, go look at everything she made.
Right. I believe we're ready to close. Do you have any book recommendations or advice for, those that are in the rehab field, but maybe want to do something like what you did? They want to start a hobby or they have a hobby and want to take it full time. What are some tips or advice you got for them?
Absolutely. I have no book advice. I have 2 small children. I do not have time to read. But turning a hobby into your profession, I almost always say don't do it because it does suck the fun out of it. This is actually my 3rd hobby that I've turned into money. And it's the only one that is actually stuck. I did crocheting and I had an Etsy shop, but as soon as people started paying me for it, it sucked the fun right out of it. And I did mini painting miniatures. No one apparently wants to actually pay for that. And let me tell you, I was really good at it. But it's a fluke, I think, that I've been doing this for so long and I haven't had any burnout except for when I overtly push myself too hard and work late into the night and stuff like that. And when I respect myself as a person who is more than just my job, this is just such a joyful career. So I think knowing that you love your hobby, maybe stick your toes and get an Etsy shop. Etsy's fees are ridiculous, but it is a great way to dip your toes into, do I actually still enjoy this when people pay me for it? And I think that's the biggest thing. Because if you feel like, oh, this isn't fun anymore, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Because forcing yourself to craft, which should be done with love and joy, is just so soul-sucking. I feel so incredibly lucky that I am able to do this. And I still work in the evening sometimes if I feel like I haven't gotten enough done, but it doesn't feel soul-sucking anymore. So I just happen to have found the perfect combination of me and this craft that just seems to work. So basically, don't force it.
Yeah, for sure. I love how you tried and tested some things out and just kept going and didn't give up, for sure. So little closing remarks here. Staying in a profession that doesn't align with one's true passion can hinder our personal growth and overall well-being. And our call to action is, I would say, to reflect on our current career satisfaction and flexibility. Are we pursuing a path that aligns with our passions? If not, it's time to explore alternative career options that offer both fulfillment, flexibility, align with our values. The journey to a more satisfying and flexible career may require stepping out of conventional paths, but the rewards are well worth the leap. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Anytime.